to sweat under my...
Getting ready to start another video.
James?
Yeah.
Mike? Organizational behavior? Chapter, I don't even know what we're on now.
6?
6, something like that. Motivation, though.
Motivation.
Wheelhouse, fair to
Big
say?
one. Big one. Yeah. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
Hey y'all, Mike Ruggles here with Organizational Behavior. This is Lecture 6, and it is all about motivation. Our conversation with James Avey and lecture here is pretty darn vital to some of the things we do within our reward systems, within human resources and management, and in general, how we engage our employees in order to get maximum effort. Remember that performance equation, P equals A times E times S. E is effort. And when we talk about motivation, that's the desire that exists within a person that spurs them on towards action. And when we're looking at work is effort directed towards a desired end outcome, which is, what we're hoping for from a performance standpoint or an outcome standpoint, like job performance and organizational commitment. So we're trying to maximize E, or spur on motivation to maximize effort within the context of work to try to get desired outcomes. And so throughout our conversation with James today, there's going to be a ton in this particular lecture. So it's going to be pretty heavy in content. And I'll do my best to try to follow along with the conversation and tie it into what you're going to be reading in the book. It's going to be pretty complicated because we're going to jump around a little bit, but I'll do my best to tie it into the book. And there's going to be a ton here. So grab your pen and a piece of paper, or however you take notes, and let's get rolling.
If you hire the right person and you have all the supporting mechanisms and they don't do anything, it's not going to work.
They have all the ability. They have all the ability in the world.
You've given them the tools, the training, and they just won't do it.
Effort is not there.
Yep.
So let's talk about motivation. What in the world is it? First off.
Well, motivation actually comes from a Greek word. I can't believe I just said that. Called mohair, and it just
mohair.
And it just means to move. So very broadly speaking, words like agency. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm motivated to do this. And then from a study, we go, why? Why? And we get into the physical contact and showing relationship. It's a sign of affection. It's making a point and number. We get into all the why. But the bottom line is something made me do that.
Have you ever read a book definition and gone, oh, gosh. Well, this is one of those that I read, and I'm like, oh, gosh. And it's really with the first half of the definition of motivation that they give versus the last half. Last half, I think, is great. The first half, I think, can be simplified, but is what it is. So what the book states is that it's a set of energetic forces. Ooh. And put that differently, it's a desire that exists within us that sets the direction, intensity, and persistence of the effort of employees at work. I like that latter part of the definition, that direction, intensity, and persistence of the effort that we give. There's a much, I think, simpler definition that I really enjoy to use, or makes much more sense for me to use in the context of employment, which is a desire that exists within a person that causes them to act. I think that might be a little bit too simple, so maybe we combine that definition with the definition, the latter half of the other definition. I think you get a pretty good one. A desire that exists within a person that causes them to act and determines the direction, intensity, and persistence of that action or that effort.
Something made me do that.
Right.
Something made you put sunglasses on top of your head other than over there. And so if we can figure out why people do things, then we can predict what they're going to do. If we can predict what they're going to do, we can get them to do what we want them to do.
Highly correlated.
Yes.
Not cause and effect. And so this really is, this is the This is a lot of the hub.
This is the nuts and bolts of a lot of OB.
Org behavior.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So org behavior, we look at different levels, right? Organizational level, group level, individual level. Most of it is at the individual level, and most of it is why people do things and how to get them to do good things,
Right.
and how to get them to stop doing bad things.
Right. So, motivation is this desire within people that causes them towards action.
To do something. Yeah.
That was a
If you're hungry, you go to the pantry.
right.
Right.
I'm motivated.
If you
to
hurt your toe, you yell. So you
Right.
can see there's stimulus response. There wasn't
Right.
much thinking when I hit my thumb with a hammer and yelled a swear word.
Yeah.
Right? But there was some thinking, and I put the nail in that place, and I was motivated to do that. So some is automatic, and some motivation is there's a longer term large sequence of thoughts. Yeah.
Got it.
Exactly.
And I think what James was getting at when he said people who are, doing exactly what you want, was he was using or referring to the term engagement. This amount of investment that people have into their energies and time and resources into the work itself or into accomplishing the desired outcomes. So when we engage people's motivation, we're trying to have them invest their effort and which causes them to use their abilities to drive towards desired outcomes, which is our performance.
So we look at it in process theories and content theories. And when I say theory, a lot of us, including me, are like, oh my gosh. It just means these are ways to explain it, right?
Right.
So I might, there's a cabinet over there. I might say, where did the cabinet come from? Well, you could explain it in terms of a mill, or you could explain it in terms of a forest. Both are true. There's just different ways of explaining it.
Right.
So same thing.
So let's go into content theory first.
Yeah.
What are some of the breakdowns of content
Yeah.
theory that we would need to cover?
A content theory is describing what motivates people.
Got it.
Process theory is the process of motivation, or how it actually works.
Got it.
So let's take intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, right?
Got it.
So for someone who's watching this lecture, maybe they like rock climbing. Let's be clear, they actually pay to rock climb. They're not paid to do it.
Most of us.
Most of us.
Unless you're a pro.
Right, unless you're a pro, then that's really cool if you're one of those people.
Yeah, I'm not.
But we do things all the time that we love to do, and they're for intrinsic reasons, right? So intrinsic just mean the motivation actually comes from inside of me. There's one theory called, it's George McClellan, I think is his name, it's needs theories. So if you have a high need for achievement, you'll find yourself going above and beyond for no more money, no more recognition, you'll just do it. If you have a high need for affiliation, you find yourself dressing in a certain way, being in certain areas to affiliate with certain people, to be seen a certain way, and you don't really get anything for it. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about you. You're just like, you're the honey badger on this stuff.
I don't care.
So it comes from like the inside, and then you get into, how was your childhood? How was your relationship with your dad? So there's all kinds of explanations for it.
Right.
And then the extrinsic motivation is I do things because I get something for it. I built a chicken coop a while ago because I needed someplace for I was motivated because I wanted the chickens to live and lay eggs, right? I got something for it. It wasn't me laying in bed at night going, man, it's always been my dream to build a chicken coop. It was it wasn't intrinsic, it was extrinsic. So what we try to do in business at a macro level is figure out the extrinsic motivators and design systems to give people what they want, promotion, pay, feedback, recognition, whatever it is. And then we try to hire people who are by nature more active. Yeah, they're going to get things done.
So, where do we take that from here to break that down into some of the theories that we need to cover?
Yeah. let's hit a few of them and kind of categorize them a little bit. So I mentioned like a needs theory is more of a content theory. The classic content theory, which we won't unpack, is Abraham Maslow, hierarchy of needs, which goes back to our very first discussion on how do we know these things work, right?
I do want to. I'm assuming that a lot of students here have probably taken Psych 101. Are they what they're gonna hear here? Is it gonna conflict a little bit sometimes with what they hear in Psych 101, specifically with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah. So let's do this.
Because you and I go,
wah
wah,
right?
Man, that sucks!
If you're gonna play golf, you have to use a driver, and I would say that to someone who's just starting golf. But someone who was really well trained in golf would be like, "What are you talking about?
I don't have.
Like, we know so much more than that statement right there. Maslow is great for Psych 101 because it shows people that we can study the mind, we can study motivation, and it shows why people
Provides
do things.
context.
Right. You peel back one layer of the onion, you go, okay, that was like crayons.
Right.
And now we're getting into calligraphy. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like something else. So Maslow is a great framework to understand that some people are motivated by things.
Yep.
That's about all its value.
And Maslow falls under needs theory, which falls under
Yeah, it's a content theory, yeah.
which falls under a content theory,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Did I explain that right? Or
Yeah,
am I-
you did 100%. So the idea with Maslow is satiation. Like, you don't move on until the bottom one is satisfied. And we used examples earlier. That's actually not true.
Yeah.
So then we can flip over like Herzberg, where we get motivators and hygiene factors. Right.
Two-factor theory.
Right. Two-factor theories, they're pretty strong. They're not based on satiation. What it basically means is there are things that we can do to motivate people, and there are things that we can do to stop getting complaints.
to ensure that people are not as dissatisfied.
Yes. Yeah.
Herzberg's two-factor theory is really important as we try to understand the impact of the tools that we utilize from a human resources standpoint and their impact on those individual mechanisms. And specifically, we look at satisfaction and motivators. So when we look at Herzberg's two-factor theory, he breaks it down into two factors. Motivators, which are things like achievement, opportunities for advancement, incentive plans like bonus plans and things like that. Things that will drive people to give discretional effort. And then he has another factor which he calls hygiene factors. That if you do not meet the basic hygiene needs of an employee, that they may tend to be dissatisfied. And so we look at things like how a supervisor treats people, their base compensation. Can I go home and take care of my family with my compensation? If those hygiene factors are not met, employees are more likely to be dissatisfied. So it doesn't necessarily satisfy employees when they're there. It just tends to dissatisfy when they are not at the right hygiene levels for that particular employee. And that's based off of, all of this is based off of perception of the employee, what matters to them. And I love that term hygiene because it's basically meeting hygiene
Brushing
needs.
your teeth, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody works in a really smelly place, they're not going to be super motivated.
Right.
For the most part. If somebody has a manager who's an abusive supervisor who just makes fun of them, mocks them all the time, it's not going to work.
You just gotta, but you have to, it doesn't mean that that's the ultimate outcome. It just
Right.
means that you might have to put other things in place
Yeah.
that help to balance that out.
Right.
So-
A classic one like that is benefits, like medical benefits.
Yeah.
If you don't have medical benefits, it's going to serve the dissatisfied. But nobody wakes up in the morning going, "Oh my gosh, I'm so pumped to go to work. I have medical coverage."
Base salary.
Right.
All
Doesn't
those things.
right.
So we try to make sure that our overall offering from an experience at our organization standpoint isn't dissatisfying you.
Right.
It's
Right.
that they're at a place where they meet your hygiene, your base needs.
Right.
And that's two-factor theory. And the second factor in two-factor theory is motivators.
Right. So before we get there, I'm gonna jump ahead to another theory just so we can look at two ways to look at it.
I'm going to keep my finger up as a pin.
So if it was a really crummy job,
Yeah.
according to Herzberg, it'd be like, well, if you can't deal with the hygiene factors, people are going to be dissatisfied. But if you go over to equity theory, we can say, well, equity theory is all about balance. And if it really stinks in here, but you pay me $40,000 more a year, I'm not happy that it stinks, but it's okay. It kind of bounces out for itself. This is
Inputs
like
and outputs, yeah.
right. This is when people talk about like, are we going to get hazard pay? Because we're going to go work in this crummy location where it's 130 degrees. Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to triple your salary, and we're going to like take care of everything and your family visits as much as we can. That's equity theory.
Yeah.
Trying to balance it.
Equity theory, just as an individual, there can be equity theory, but also compared to other people
Yep.
and then compared to other organizations, all that stuff. Right?
So you just get into then at that point internal equity versus external equity.
Yep.
So the whole idea behind equity theory is I'm going to try to make it fair, and if they cut my pay, I'm cutting my effort.
Right. Two key things I wanted to hit on this quick pause. One of them is something that James was hinting towards. I want to hit on something there. And then two, I want to make sure to cover two key terms within equity theory that we kind of talked around, but I don't think we said those specific words and gave them a definition. What James was hinting towards through this part of the conversation as he shifted towards equity theory is that these theories are not mutually exclusive of each other. He introduced it in the beginning when he talked about a cabinet, if you remember that. Well, some people will say that the wood came from a forest, and some people will look at the cabinet and go, well, no, it was made in a manufacturing place. Like, okay, they're both true. They're just different lenses that we look through at that particular, to describe that particular cabinet. And we do the same thing with human behavior and motivation. And so these aren't mutually exclusive. You're not going to look at needs theory or two-factor theory and go, well, I'm a two-factor theory person. I don't think equity theory really holds water. Well, you're not one or the other. They can both apply to the same situation. Just look at it through a different lens. And equity theory, the two terms that I want to make sure to introduce are inputs and outcomes. And I mean, James hinted towards them. I just want to make sure we nail them. And that inputs are the things that we give to a company, and the outcomes are the things that we receive from that organization. So inputs that I can give are my knowledge, my skills, my abilities, my education. Outputs that I receive or outcomes that I receive could be, pay, could be clout, could be advancement. It could be all sorts of things. And what is important in equity theory is that the perception of the employee is that their inputs at least match the outputs. If the value of the outputs are perceived as not as much as what I'm giving, then my satisfaction level can tend to decrease. And fine. I love that these are all just, it's looking at the same, going back to your...
Yep, it's like a diamond just spinning it around.
Yeah, you're looking at the same thing just through different lenses. Yeah. And so all these theories are just different lenses of looking at what's triggering human behavior.
One of the most popular theories that I think is underrated.
I still have my pin, by the way.
Oh, what was the pin
on? Motivators on two-factor theory. But
the motivators. Yeah. What was the question? What are they?
Well, keep talking about what you're talking about, and then we'll...
Well, I was gonna switch over to expectancy theory.
Let's finish two-factor theory because we talked about we were talking about hygiene. Mm-hmm. We jumped over to equity theory. Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about motivators back to two-factor theory.
Yeah, motivators are when you're looking at your group or your team, your strategy or whatever. You're going, how do I drop in? Think of like almost like sticks and carrots. How do I drop in a carrot that moves people toward the direction I want them to go to?
Inspires action.
Right. So a classic one is
inspires desired action.
Right.
I should say.
Sales bonus.
Yeah.
Really straightforward.
Right.
If you do this thing,
right.
I'm building a structure that motivates you to do what I want you to do. Yeah.
Right. And
it's based on, so a lot of the motivation theory comes from 4 different things from Scarian psychology. There's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, and extinction. And people often confused negative reinforcement and punishment. They're not the same thing. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of the motivators are focused on positive reinforcement. Mm-hmm. When somebody does something that you want, how do we quickly, fast as possible? You don't have a record-breaking sales day and get the bonus check in December.
Right.
Like right away, you want that motivation for
it. And we can talk about that from an expectancy theory standpoint because that'll jump right into it because that's all about motivators, right? So, but we one of our bonus plans that we created was mainly created for a cycle that meant sense for our production cycle. Made no sense for our agriculture cycle. But we treated it all the same. Uh-huh. And we would pay our bonuses out based off of the production cycle that was occurring. Well, when we paid it out, our harvesting people were already into the next cycle of harvest. Yeah. And we would pay a bonus. And there was this disconnect between, well, why the heck are you paying this now?
Yeah.
And why didn't you reward me before? And all it had to do with our mistiming of things. And we had to change and adapt that plan to make sure it aligned to quick reinforcement of the behaviors that were occurring within the cycles that made sense to them. So when we're thinking about why this is important, this is important in how we structure, going back to two-factor theory, how we structure our base compensation, how we structure our employee experiences, how we structure how our managers treat employees, for sure, from a hygiene factor theory. When we think about opportunities for advancement, how we set up our bonus structures, all that stuff, that's within the motivators. And then we can take that out and talk about expectancy theory.
Well, yeah, when you just talked about opportunities for advancement, that's in my head immediately went was expectancy theory, right? It's do I have a reasonable belief that I have the ability to do this, and then if I work hard at it, I'll actually be able to do it, and you'll give me what I want.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a full organizational behavior model, right there. It's like, can you design when I don't want to say compensation isn't because people think money. So like a full employee experience, total rewards. Yeah. Can you design a full experience that people actually want? And then somebody may say, well, yeah, it's, money and benefits. Really? Because a 20-year-old wants something different than a 90-year-old, and they're both working at your firm.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Changes throughout their career.
Right. So design things that people actually want. And then you have to convince them that this is self-efficacy, they have the ability to do it, and then you have to provide the context where they'll be successful. And if you can line that up, I think expectancy theory is one of the most intuitive ones there.
Absolutely. So explain, we got valence, instrumentality, expectancy. So explain that process real quick.
Yeah.
So first step is, do I believe
if I work hard
that I can accomplish something?
Let's do it on a test really quick, okay?
Yeah.
A student test, and we'll play with this example. Yeah. Does the student believe that if they study really hard, they'll get a good grade on the test? Okay. If they don't believe that, they're not going to study hard, and they're going to do bad on the test.
And the term for that is
self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and specifically it's means and task efficacy, but that's another boring conversation. Right. So it's really simple. Do you think if you work hard, you can be successful? Remember, it's not just do you think you're good at it. Do you think if you work hard, you'll be successful? As a side note, this is why like a lot of the parenting stuff, they say stop telling your kids they're good at their sport. Tell your kids they've worked hard and so they're good at their sport.
Yeah.
The connection is not I'm just this way, because what happens one day when they're not? Right? If you encourage the effort, they go, well, I can try harder. So anyway, so does the student believe if they study hard that they'll get a good grade on the test? All right, sounds good. There's some expectancy. Is the
that
study
was the word I was looking for?
Expectancy, yeah. Is the test instrumental in getting the outcome, an A in the class, right? So if you have 1,000 points in the class and the test is 5 points, it's not very instrumental, right? But if the test is a bigger portion of that, and we go, okay, if I work hard, I think I can do well, and if I do well, it actually matters. The last one is
it worth it?
Do I want it?
Yeah.
Yeah, do I actually want it?
Valence.
The person who has a 3.48, and if they get a 3.5, they get accepted into med school. They really, really want it.
Yeah,
worth
it.
The person like me who has a 2.1 and just doesn't give a crap, I go, I think if I work hard, I can get a good grade on the test. And I think the test matters for the ultimate outcome. I just don't want the ultimate outcome.
So that's the reason why in my HRM 381, all the seniors that are about to graduate got a C.
Right.
Because they didn't care anymore. That's not worth it.
That's not worth it.
Not worth my effort.
So we have to do a whole cycle as a manager.
Yeah.
We have to think of it like a little kid playing soccer. It doesn't matter. We have to convince them if they work hard, they'll get better. We have to convince them if they'll get better, they'll win games. And convince them winning games is super cool.
Right.
It's fun.
Now, like James, I love expectancy theory, and I love using it as a checklist as I design my incentive systems. And I'm going to talk about them in monetary incentives. I know we talked about that you can have all sorts of other rewards, but some of our incentive systems, we don't think through them well enough. We may not think through, can somebody's discretional effort actually help enough to accomplish that particular goal? If not, we lose instrumentality. Are we putting enough of an incentive in place that's worth all that discretional effort? That's valence. Does somebody believe in themselves that can they actually put forth effort that will actually cause improvement in their own outcomes? That's expectancy. So both the fact that it can happen and also that they also believe in themselves from an expectancy standpoint. All those things are vital as we put together incentive systems for our employees.
A few more things on motivation.
We're still on need. Well, no, we're actually into
I was going to switch over to some justice components because
Yep.
it's related to equity theory,
Yep.
and then maybe just for a minute talk a little bit about positive psychology.
Oh, I love
If
it.
we can work it in.
Wheelhouse.
We can work it in just a little bit. So equity theory, the idea of things being fair. Like if you and I have the same job, we work the same, you treat us the same, all that kind of stuff. Justice theory has a few major components. It started out with distributive justice and procedural justice. So distributive justice means when you pass out your bonus, did you pass it out in a way that was fair? And everybody has their own definition of what is fair, but I can tell you, if I think it's unfair, you just done piss me off. And I'm really demotivated, right? And people are okay with getting paid more or getting more feedback or more recognition, but not less, for the most part. So
It's amazing how that works.
right. So if you have $100 or whatever and you pass it out, the second piece is procedural justice. It means were the procedures fair?
Yeah, fair.
So I passed out this $100 to this team of 3, and I gave the guy that I really like $70, and the other people I gave 15 because I just don't feel like they did as much. No, I didn't measure their performance. I just don't feel like they did as much. That's going to blow up. It's going to blow up. Distributive justice was not there, and procedural justice wasn't there. But if I were to come back and say, actually, all of you clocked in and clocked out. You worked 70 hours, you worked 15 hours, you worked 15 hours. That's how I came to this conclusion. The people that got $15 and be like, I don't like the decision, but I get it.
Right.
I get it. There was a process used, and it was somewhat of a reasonable process.
And ideally, you explain that process
Beforehand. Yeah. So procedural justice actually acts as a substitute for distributive justice. Meaning, so this is really important for managers, because first-line managers get stuck all the time implementing some company initiative that they don't agree with, right? So if you are kind of forcing, that's part of your job, right? If you're forcing and you've done your pushback and you've done your boundary spanning and you've said your piece and tried to change it, if you couldn't, and you're not going to quit, right? It's not that bad. You're going to do it. In terms of your team accepting it, so you're not losing, credibility with them. That's why I go right to procedural justice. This is the reason we're making this decision is, and then defend it in as rational way as possible. So try to be fair in the first place,
Right.
but recognize that whoever doesn't get the most is going to think it's not fair.
100%.
Taking that further, so those are the two main ones forever, like 30 years. Taking it further, actually, the author of this textbook is Jason Colquitt, is like the king of justice research. That's where he got his name to fame and probably got the opportunity to publish this textbook because of his work in justice. Yeah. But another one is informational justice. We talked about knowledge sharing.
Knowledge sharing.
Right. Were you kept out of knowing things that people didn't want you to know? Well, that's going to be a big demotivator. I don't trust this place anymore. Interactional justice. This is when you get pulled over by a police officer. A lot of the complaints about police officers are how people were treated, right? I mean, I'm not going to open that that Pandora's box. There's a lot there, but I've been pulled over by lots of police officers. I've had good experiences and bad experiences. It was almost irrelevant if I got a ticket or not. I'm like, were you nice? Did you treat me like a person? I'm respectful to you. Were you respectful to me? Because when you're not, as this is a manager saying, employee, I'm changing your job to do this, and the person says why. Here's your chance for procedural justice. Here's how we got to this decision, and managers will often say, it's my job,
Right.
because I told you to,
Right.
like a parent, because I said so, right? I'm in charge here. Now the person's been disrespected. Interactional justice, no procedural justice. You just lost an employee.
Right.
So all 4 of those types of justices are important.
Cool.
Yeah. Last one, positive psychology.
There you go. Wheelhouse.
No, I'm gonna make this really short. But
Really?
Yeah, I really am. So the psychology as it applies to business, for the most part, psychology looked at how do we take broken people and help them to function, right?
Which is all people.
Which is all people are broken
Yeah.
in some ways. But after World War II, they started getting funding for things like PTSD, suicide
Right.
rates, stuff like that. So now, I mean, if you look at the number of psychological disorders, how many there were for, 200 years of psychology, and then, 1948, like everything starts climbing, and now there's a name and a title and a Wikipedia page for everything.
Because it was funded and...
It was funded to find problems, to find solutions to those problems.
Right.
And what it abandoned forever was, how do we just make functioning people flourish?
Yeah.
So that's if I'm not sure how much Colquitt's going to get into kind of the positive psychology, positive psychological capital piece, but that's the big idea, and I call that more like that's like level 2, level 3 managing, right? Level 1 managing is kind of figuring out your job, right? Level 2 is I want to increase performance to everybody. Level 3 is I want to move from performing, getting it done, to flourishing.
Yeah.
Like people not just killing it in their job, but killing it in their relationships. This is about culture formation, stuff like that. To me, that's more like upper echelons of management.
And what are the 4? Go through it. Yeah.
There's psychological capital. Like we talk about human capital, psychological capital, stuff that you can build and you can destroy.
Yeah.
They are self-efficacy, which we talked about. That's just confidence in your individual ability to do something. There's optimism. Do you see like, okay, this might work out. You know, it's a good possibility. That's almost like the classic hiring a more positive person, like Dory, basically from Finding Nemo. Like they're in the whale.
Yeah.
It's half empty. I'd say it's half full. Yeah, exactly. Optimism. There is resilience. And this goes back to our stress chapter when we coaching people.
Yeah.
You can't prevent people from taking shots on the chin. Like it's just life. Stuff's going to happen. What we can do is build up some of those resources so it doesn't just tank them and wreck them. Right. So resilience, we hire for these things and we also manage for these things. The last one is hope. And when we say a hopeful person, there's a scientific term of hope. It's not like, oh, gee, I hope it doesn't rain today.
Yeah.
Hope is mainly about pathways thinking. So think of it like, okay, you and I, we're in Ellensburg right now. We need to get to Seattle, and we're going to SeaTac Airport. They say, well, I-90's closed. Okay, what do we do?
Yeah. How can we?
Let's play.
Figure it out.
How do we get there?
Yeah.
No, really. I-90's closed. So we go Highway 12, right? Okay, Highway 12 is closed. What do we do?
Oh, you were asking.
Yeah, really asking. Highway 12 is closed. What do we do?
We go up Highway 2, go around.
Go up Highway 2. Go Stevens Pass.
Yeah.
No, for some reason that one's closed too.
84.
84. I don't even know what that is. But if
Go
it's
down to Oregon and go across.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Okay. It's not going to work either for whatever reason. And we're just going to keep doing this until you go hot air balloon.
Go to Spokane, get into a plane.
Like, yeah. we're gonna keep doing this until we're hang gliding off Snoqualmie Pass, right?
Right.
As soon as we say if that doesn't work, we don't have any other plans. At that point, you're hopeless.
Right.
So this would be like if someone's getting ready to take on like a major task, I would like pause and go, what's likely to go wrong? Okay. What are you going to do if that happens? Okay. If your solution doesn't work, what are you going to do if that happens?
You're increasing their pathways.
Right. So then, like, you hit a wall, and like, oh, we already talked about this. Like, I know what our next step is. Tell me, those are the 4.
Which tends to increase resilience, possibly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So these aren't like
No,
things
they're-
that stand alone. They interconnect.
They are, yeah. They call it a root construct. If you can find someone like the efficacious, but also positive, like optimism, they can think pathways thinking, and when things don't go their way, they don't just bail out. Like they're resilient. Promote them.
Yeah, 100%.
Make them happy.
The things we look for in high potential employees, hippos.
Yeah.
Right. So, and what I love about this last topic that you brought up, it does show that these aren't all standalone things. That job satisfaction isn't standalone.
Right.
Motivation isn't standalone. Stress isn't standalone. These are all things that integrate. We're talking about human behavior.
Right.
Complicated.
Right.
Incredibly
Cognitive theory. Yeah.
complex. And again, all this isn't causation.
Yeah.
We're talking about things that when we behave certain ways as managers, when we try to encourage certain things as employees, when we try to set up certain things to make sure that people are satisfied, whatever it is, or make sure that people aren't dissatisfied, we're trying to do things as an organization that try to create the best desirable outcomes.
As much
on
as we
average.
know. Yeah. And I think one of the, I maybe last comment on that. Let's contrast for a minute what we do, what we know in organizational behavior about what works and doesn't versus what we know in oncology, cancer, what works and what doesn't. The main difference, why the medical field is so far ahead in many ways, one of the main differences has to do with instrumentation. Like they can measure really well your temperature. Right? Shooting for 98.6. We know exactly what we want it to be. And we stick a thermometer to your tongue. We can tell you almost exactly what it is. What do we want for employee engagement?
Self-reported behavior.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want someone highly engaged because then they're going to go to stress and burnout, right? We don't want someone low engaged. Then it'll be bad performance. So what do we want? Well, what job is it? What year is it? What industry? What season? So all those different variables, that's a lot different than putting a thermometer under your tongue.
Yeah, you don't have a controlled environment of a person.
So it's It's complex, but man, it's fun.
Right. Motivational theory. This is the hub
Yeah.
of the wheel of org behavior. So spend a lot of time in this chapter.
Definitely.
Have questions, let me know.
Awesome. Peace.